people would see as him as a, a very active agent and probably, good value for the money.
I mean, it's at least some transparency, isn't it?
King Charles has made a decision that quietly reshapes Prince William's future, and almost no one in Britain noticed it happen. In the spring of 2026, with no crown, no ceremony, and no announcement, the king handed his son a power the reigning monarch is meant to keep for himself, while he still sits firmly on the throne. It looks at first like paperwork. Underneath, it is a father deliberately pulling the future closer, and a truth neither man will say aloud, that every step carrying William toward the throne also carries him toward the day he loses his father. A quiet power. So, here is what he was actually handed. For decades, one of the quietest privileges of being the British monarch has been the right to grant something called a royal warrant. It sounds small. It is not. A royal warrant is the royal household's official seal of approval, given to a company or a person who has supplied goods or services to the royals on a regular, ongoing basis for at least 5 of the past 7 years. Earn one, and you may display the royal arms on your products, your packaging, your stationery, your vehicles, even the front of your shop, for up to 5 years. In British business, it is about as close to a royal blessing as a brand will ever get. You cannot buy one, or advertise your way into one. It can only be given from the top by hand. And here is the part that matters. For most of this reign, only 2 people in the entire country could grant one: King Charles and Queen Camilla. That was it. Since Charles came to the throne in 2022, he held the power close, exactly the way the monarchs before him did. His mother, Queen Elizabeth II, granted 686 royal warrants across her 70 years on the throne. Charles himself granted more than 150 during the long decades he spent as Prince of Wales, waiting. The right to hand them out has always sat at the very top of the institution, right beside the crown itself, meant for the person who wears it, and the consort at their side. That is how tightly the crown holds its own instruments, not by accident, by instinct. Power at the top is guarded, because the moment you share it, you admit something monarchs prefer to leave unsaid, that one day you will not be there to hold it yourself. Then, without a word of fanfare, Charles changed that. He formally invited Prince William and Catherine, the Prince and Princess of Wales, to grant royal warrants in their own names. When the palace confirmed it, William's private secretary put it simply that their royal highnesses were delighted to be able to recognize and celebrate British industry, creativity, and skill through the granting of warrants. The roles took effect in the spring of 2026, which means that, right now, the future king is no longer just waiting his turn. He is already using one of the monarch's own instruments, while his father still reigns. The monarch's gift. It is easy to hear the word warrant and picture a form in a drawer. Picture it differently. Picture the crown deciding, out in the open, which parts of British life carry its trust. When Charles and Camilla granted their first warrants of the new reign in May 2024, close to 600 names made the list. Some were household giants, some were tiny family firms who had supplied the palace so long that nobody working there could remember a time before it. Each warrant goes to a named person inside a company, not to the faceless brand, and at any moment there are more than 800 of them alive across the country. Together they form a quiet map of everything the royal household actually leans on, from the grand to the astonishingly ordinary. Most of the country will never see that map, but it is real, and it is guarded, and until now the king alone drew its lines. And losing one says the opposite loudly. Picture December 2024. Somewhere in a boardroom, Cadbury, the chocolate maker that had carried a royal warrant for more than 170 years, learns it has been dropped. Sit with that number for a second. 170 years. Generations came and went, believing that little crest on the wrapper was permanent, part of the name itself. And in one decision, it is gone. The story is around the world before the afternoon is out, because everyone understands what a loss like that really means. It is the crown quietly taking its trust back. Years earlier, the great department store Harrods lost its warrant too, in the middle of real bad blood between the royal household and the store's owner at the time. So, this is not decoration. The power to give this seal and to take it away is a genuine lever. It makes reputations. It moves money. It says favor or disfavor without a single official ever opening their mouth. That is the lever Charles has just placed in his son's hand. If you want to understand the crown the way it actually moves and not the way the headlines pretend it does, subscribe now, because this channel lives in exactly these quiet decisions, the ones that never make the front page and change everything underneath. Because the real question is not what Charles gave, it is why he gave it now. And there is one more detail that lifts this out of the paperwork entirely. When Catherine grants her first warrants, she becomes the first Princess of Wales to hold this power in 116 years. The last woman to do it was Mary of Teck before 1910, back before 2 world wars, before television, before almost anyone alive today was born. Diana never held it. For over a century, the Princess of Wales carried enormous public attention and almost none of the crown's real instruments. Charles has just broken that pattern, on purpose, for his son's wife. He did not have to. No rule forced his hand. He looked at the woman his son married, at the pull she already holds over the country, and decided she should carry the crown's trust in her own name. That is a choice. And choices in this family are never just choices. They are signals. Why now? Timing with this family is never an accident. So ask the honest question. Why loosen his grip on a monarch's power now, and not years ago, and not years from now? You already know the shadow over the answer. In early 2024, Buckingham Palace announced that the king had been diagnosed with cancer. He has kept working through his treatment, staying on the throne, showing up tired some days, and refusing to slow down. Not many people would. Treatment takes what it takes, quietly, in private rooms the cameras never reach. And then you are expected to stand in a receiving line and smile and carry the weight of a 1,000-year institution on your shoulders as if nothing is wrong. Charles has done exactly that. Robert Jobson, who has watched him up close for years and written his life, reads the man plainly. Charles believes in duty to his bones, Jobson has said, and would only step back if his health made carrying on impossible. Sit with that for a second. This is not a king edging toward the door. This is a king shoring up the ground beneath him, so nothing gives way if the weather turns. And he knows that ground better than anyone alive. Charles waited longer for the throne than any heir in British history, becoming king at 73, after a lifetime as Prince of Wales in the exact spot William stands in now. He spent more years preparing than most people get in an entire career. He knows the loneliness of that wait. He knows what it does to a person to stand next in line, ready for a lifetime. Whatever he is doing for his son now, he is doing it from memory. Meanwhile, William has been picking up more and more, leading the ceremonies, hosting the receptions, standing in where only his father used to stand. The warrant power fits that pattern like a final piece. Not a transfer of the crown, a transfer of weight. Inherited through loss. And that weight has a second face, one the palace will never print. Because think about what it means to be William right now. Every new piece of his father's role that slides toward him is also a small reminder of the only way it becomes fully his. The crown comes to him through loss. There is no version where it does not. No ceremony softens that, no statement spells it out, but it sits underneath every folder and every new duty. To be prepared for the throne is to be prepared for a world without the man teaching you how to sit on it. That is the quiet cruelty of it. The better his father prepares him, the closer the loss starts to feel. Gratitude and dread, arriving in the same envelope every single time. He signed up for none of this, not really. You do not choose to be born the son of a king, you simply are, and one day the being of it quietly becomes the doing of it, ready or not. Charles knows that exact ache from the inside, because he lived it. Every lesson his mother ever gave him in how to be king was, at the same time, a rehearsal for the day he would lose her. Decade after decade, each briefing, each quiet instruction, each small transfer of duty, all of it pointing at the same morning he could not let himself picture. Imagine learning your whole future by imagining your own mother's death, over and over, for 50 years. He carried that for most of his life. So look again at how calmly he is handing William these powers now, and you start to see what it really is. A father trying to spare his son the one thing he was never spared himself. Not the grief. Nobody can lift that. The unreadiness. It is protection dressed as paperwork. And William already knows the far end of this because he is a father too. His own boy George stands second in line, a child still doing his homework, who will one day sit through the very lessons William is only starting to learn. The wait does not stop with one man. It slides down the line, the way it always has, each heir taught the role by the very person it will cost him to lose. Charles prepares William. In time, William will prepare George. That is the strange, unbroken thing at the center of the monarchy. Love and duty and loss tied so tightly together that nobody inside it has ever quite managed to pull them apart. Which is exactly why the next part matters as much as it does. The Kate effect. Now, there is a reason this particular power lands harder in Catherine's hands than it would in almost anyone else's. Go back to her engagement, more than a decade ago. A young woman, not yet a princess, steps in front of the cameras beside the man she is going to marry, wearing a simple blue wrap dress. That is all, a dress. And within hours it is gone, sold out, everywhere. Women across the country deciding, all at once, that they wanted the exact thing she wore. Retailers watched it happen and gave it a name they still use to this day, the Kate effect. A coat, a pair of earrings, a handbag, worn once in public. And by that evening, the shelves are bare and the reorders are flying. No advertising campaign in the country can reliably do what she does almost by accident, just by getting dressed in the morning. That is not marketing. It is something closer to gravity, and the whole industry knows it. Now, formalize that pull. A royal warrant from Catherine would not be some quiet household nod. It would be one of the most wanted endorsements in the whole of British commerce, because it takes the reach she already has and stamps it with the authority of the crown itself. Royal watchers have pointed out what that really does, that it carries a centuries-old tradition to a whole new generation. The people who found the royal family through her, and who buy what she is seen wearing. And do not mistake it for a marketing badge a company can print for itself. Under a law that runs all the way back to 1887, it is illegal to falsely claim you hold a royal warrant. It is a protected mark of trust, granted by name, and two of those names now belong to the couple almost everyone already expects to reign next. A slow handover. Step back from the warrants and the real shape of it comes up through the surface. Because this was never one decision on its own. It is one visible piece of something the palace has been doing, quietly and steadily, for a while, not weeks, not months. A patient, deliberate procession of small steps, each one too quiet to make a headline by itself. The people who watch that household closely describe a future king who is not sitting still, waiting. William has built a small, trusted circle of his own advisors. He is setting his own priorities, running his own diary, and his own big decisions through his own team, shaping how his side of the monarchy works instead of simply inheriting his father's way of doing it. They call the separation deliberate, a reign being drafted in advance, in pencil, long before anyone writes it in ink. And over the last couple of years, it has become easy to trace if you are looking. William at the state occasions, William at his father's shoulder through the heavy national moments, William taking on what used to be the kings alone. Each appearance looked ordinary by itself. Line them all up in a row, and they read like preparation. None of it announced, none of it framed as a countdown. Just a future king learning the real texture of the job, one true task at a time, while the man who holds the job is still there to catch his mistakes. So, hold. On to the one thing almost everyone gets backwards. This is not a king clearing his desk. Preparing an heir is not the same as preparing to leave, and it is very often the opposite. A monarch making his own reign steadier, not weaker, by making sure the man behind him is ready. Charles is not handing William the throne. He is handing him the tools, one at a time, so that whenever the moment comes, in 5 years or in 20, the crown does not fall to a stranger to power. It falls to someone who has already been using it, carefully, in daylight, with his father still standing beside him. The road ahead. So, where does that leave things tonight, as it stands? Charles is king, fully, plainly, sovereign, and nothing in this changes that. The palace has been careful to call it exactly what it is, a recognition of the role William and Catherine already carry. The two of them will grant their first warrants, choosing which corners of British life get to where the crown's trust, stepping into a tradition that runs back centuries and that, until now, sat almost entirely with the king and his queen. That is a door, opened on purpose, that had been shut for 100 years. But do not shrink what has moved here. A power Charles guarded through the first years of his reign now belongs in part to the man who comes after him. Catherine holds an instrument of the crown that no Princess of Wales has touched since before the First World War. And the heir everyone pictured waiting patiently behind his father is, in 100 small and deliberate ways, no longer only waiting. He is being handed the crown's own tools, one by one, and taught to use them while there is still a father there to do the teaching. That is the real story, and it was never going to fit inside one dramatic headline. The monarchy almost never turns with a bang. It turns like this: a quiet decision, a short line from the palace, a power passed gently from one hand toward another, years before the country thinks to look. By the time Britain fully understands what has happened, it will simply be the way things already are. There will be no single moment to point back to, just a short line in the spring of 2026 that turned out to matter far more than it looked. The crown has not been passed. It is being prepared to pass. And that may be the most telling thing King Charles has ever decided about his son's future. If that pulled the real story into focus for you, subscribe, because the royal moments that matter are almost never the loud ones. They are the quiet decisions like this that reshape the monarchy while everyone is watching the wrong door. Then tell me in the comments where you land. Is Charles strengthening his own reign by preparing William this openly? Or is he telling us, without ever saying it, that the future is closer than the palace wants us to believe? I read the replies.